But really, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk tonight about how to switch advisors. So this is like a topic we get asked about all the time. People have so many concerns and questions when it comes to this very practical task. So we're going to dive into that. I'm so honored. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Darryl and I are both here in Toronto. Darryl, I'm so glad that you could join me as well tonight. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to do a couple quick acknowledgements? I've decided I'm not going to do a land acknowledgement tonight. It feels funny for me with webinars, just because people are coming from all over the place. Instead, just want to acknowledge that we live within a capitalist system that is fundamentally unfair and discriminatory in so many different ways. That capitalism sucks, quite frankly, and that there are a lot of issues with it. And that understanding that those of us who have a certain level of wealth where we have investments, right? If you're here trying to figure out how to switch your investments, presumably you've already got some, that there is a privilege that goes along with that, and that it is participating in capitalism that allowed us to amass this wealth and to be able to do that. So want to kind of recognize that having money sort of comes with a little bit of responsibility here, and that what we're going to do is talk about how to switch it and move it in a more sustainable direction, which I think is so important. At the same time, really need to acknowledge that so many people are struggling right now. The economy is in a really tough situation for so many people. Around the corner from where I live is Allen Gardens, where there's an encampment. So many people in my community experiencing homelessness right now. And so just want to acknowledge that it can sometimes feel a little bit crass talking about money and investments, knowing that people are struggling. At the same time, I think there's so much power in those of us who have money, who have this ability. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how we can solve some of these problems and really be part of the solution with our investments. So really just want to acknowledge that. The next thing I want to acknowledge is that people come to conversations about money overwhelmingly with a lot of emotions around guilt and shame. And so many people wish they had done this a long time ago. I don't know if you're one of these people in the chat, let us know. But a lot of people are like, Tim, I wish I had done this a while ago. And they feel a little bit bad about that. And I just want to recognize that the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So that's what we're doing tonight, is we're going to plant some seeds. We're going to take some action. We're going to actually learn something that is so important when it comes to the financial system and how we can actually switch our money into a more sustainable option. So that really is what we're going to focus on tonight. We're going to be here afterwards for a Q&A. Darryl, if you can stick around. And if people have questions and you want to talk, specifics or big things, whatever, happy to share all of that information. Amy, yes, there is going to be a recording. So a lot of people are probably watching this on YouTube, so we can welcome them as well. Encourage them to use the little chat to leave a comment there. But really what we're going to be covering today is, number one, common fears about switching. I think a lot of people, when we talk about switching investments, there's a lot of worries, a lot of concerns. So let's talk about that. Let's kind of lay those out. From there, we're going to do a step-by-step how-to. So this is the really practical part of it, where we've kind of broken it down into like 5 steps to switch your investments. And then as well, we have sort of some hot tips that when you're thinking about making the switch, this is stuff that Darryl and I, we've done this hundreds of times, filled out these forms all these times. So there's a little bit of language. There's a little bit we've got these little hot tips, that you can consider when you're making the switch. Most of you know who I am. My name is Tim Nash. My company is called Good Investing. I'm on a mission to help 1 million Canadians invest intentionally. More and more, I see myself as a teacher and really trying to teach people about personal finance, about sustainability, really about how to align your investments with your values. So that's a big part of who I am. But really, I want the spotlight tonight to be a little bit on my colleague Darryl here. And so Darryl, I'm just going to transition back into this and just wondering if you can take a few minutes. And I think most of my audience sort of knows me and my background, but, would love to give you the chance to share your story.
Cool. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Darryl. So currently, I am the head of Eastern Canada for an investment management firm called Genesis Capital Management. I'm also an associate client relationship manager. And so what that means is that I help people manage their finances, manage their investments. Genesis is an investment management firm that's focused on sustainable and impact investment management. We manage over $2 billion in assets for individuals, foundations. David Suzuki Foundation, for instance, is one of our clients. And the reason they select us is because of our views on sustainability and because of our views on impact. We really take it seriously. And it's a fantastic group of people at Genesis. You may not know the name. They're based in Vancouver. We now have a Toronto office. So
And we're going to talk
it's
more about Genis. We're going to get a chance to kind of dive into that a little bit. How did you kind of get started in this industry? Like, what's your background?
uh it's I think started I think like most people kind of working in finance. You just have a regular investment job or financial services role, and you have a perspective perhaps on the environment or sustainability, and you're hoping that it's there, and you're hoping that, whatever entity you're working at, if it's a small firm or a big firm, that they take that into consideration. But I definitely got to a breaking point. I think a lot of people who we talk to, a lot of our clients and hopefully prospective clients, they get to a breaking point for a number of different reasons. And for me is when I was working with an institutional manager and I was an analyst. I was responsible for knowing intimately what companies in the energy space were doing, in particular pipeline companies, Enbridge, TransCanada, Kinder Morgan. We had to be experts on those companies. And we noticed this transition to a lower carbon economy, this focus on climate change. And this is over a decade ago. But the broader industry was really not receptive to it. Or even our own portfolio managers were not that receptive to it. And keep in mind, we're managing like hundreds of billions of dollars on behalf of our insurance policyholders, on behalf of pensioners, and no one was really thinking about climate change. And in fact, they were basically, sort of thinking that climate change is not even real, or if they did acknowledge it, perhaps it's like that's not our problem. We're here to make as much money as possible. So you get to a breaking point, and I recall, so many different projects, Keystone and Northern Gateway, and the big challenges with a lot of those problems for pipeline companies was getting product to market. I don't know if anyone on the call remembers Keystone XL and all these projects, the difficulties with transporting energy across the country. They're practical ones. And by chance, one night I had a conversation with a friend from school, and she was talking about the challenges that small food producers were having in getting their products around town. If you make jams, if you make curries and whatnot. So I just kind of had this light that went off. I was not pleased with really where the trajectory of work. There was the lack of sustainability and focus in that work. And so I made a clean break. I was like, I see this opportunity of perhaps being able to use my insights on pipeline companies, on energy companies, in weirdly enough, the food distribution space, and in particular in Toronto. It just is really difficult if you're starting out and you've got to deliver things to 10 different places across the city. It takes like an hour to get from me to Tim. So it was very difficult for a lot of those companies to do that. So I used my insight. I started an emissions free delivery company, which sounds nuts for somebody who works at a desk and is focused on investments. But I started an emissions-free delivery company. It's called the Drop Distribution. We use cargo cycles, electric vehicles, and alongside doing that, I had my own investment consulting firm after I left my corporate gig. And that investment consulting firm was focused on empowering people, helping them look at their investments, helping them align their investments with their values when they wanted to. And that's when, like so many people do nowadays, you meet other people on the internet. And so I met Tim. We met, I think, very early in my sort of kind of foray into independent work. And so I was doing two things. I was doing this emissions free delivery business, had my own consulting firm, helping investors who were DIY focused align their investments with their values. So it was a strange time that I was in. So, but it was great. The people who worked with Tim, like they and continue to work with, are amazing. You're fantastic. I'm just going to put that out there for I think most people know who you are. They know, probably have heard of Tim Nash, but um, I think that it's just, to take a second and just go out of the way and just acknowledge and show appreciation for connecting on the internet. And, at least for me, it was like, oh, here's a person who actually gets it. Here's a person who cares and sees people, their specific values, their specific needs, and is not trying to just sell them mutual funds or investment products. I mean, you really got it from ages ago. And it's been fantastic. And I think so important, the work that you've done over that time and we're continuing to do together nowadays. So yeah, that's I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it was great. I mean, it was so awesome when we connected, when you were on your entrepreneurial journey, and we were able to sort of join forces for a little while. And you certainly helped a number of people, clients here at Good Investing. And then I think it was sort of, I want to say about a year ago, a little more like at the start of last year, that
yep.
we started to chat, and you just seemed a little, I would say, I don't know, tired of the entrepreneurial grind. Is that fair?
That's part of it for sure. I think that was part of it, but there were just a number of different opportunities that came up, and one of them was this firm who we knew really well, but who I think a lot of people in the local market in Toronto didn't really know intimately or very well at all. And so when we happened to run into one of the individuals from Genesis at that time, they're kind of like, we're looking to expand here. Do you know of anyone, any individuals or firms that is interested in coming along this journey with us? And for me, given my background and working with large institutional investors and working with small institutional investors, and I think for the both of us at that time, recognizing that not everyone is fantastic at DIY investing. It's really, really hard. The internet makes it seem fairly straightforward and easy, and it can be, but there's a lot of tools and a lot of reinforcement and a lot of swatting away of information and well-meaning advice at many times, but information that isn't necessarily relevant to you. So it was like, there is the DIY route, but I think alongside that, and along with that, there's definitely a spot for people who have no interest, no desire, are intimidated to have their money managed. So for me, it was a nice continuation, nice opportunity to be able to continue to help people with a sustainability lens, with a firm that's focused on meeting people where they're at. They're not salesy and not pushing. They're all lovely individuals. Our PMs, our back office, everybody just shares a mentality of really trying to help people, regular people, along with their financial journeys. So that opportunity came up, and it just made sense to join their journey. And so it's been a really fantastic first year or so with them.
Yeah, and so for me again, like my mission is just to help a million Canadians, and I just want people to get help. And my focus is always going to be on the DIY side. That is sort of my bread and butter. The people that want to learn how to do it themselves and control, those all those things. But I've learned over the last little while that not everybody wants this, and in fact, a lot of people do want to work with an advisor. So I was just so thrilled when you joined Genis, and to have the relationship that we've got to be able to offer. I can help on the DIY side, and if someone wants full service, that they can talk to you. I just think it's such a good fit, and really excited to be able to kind of like keep growing and partnering and evolving in different ways.
Absolutely.
So I just want to remind people why we're here, why we are talking about, investing and sustainable investing. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I did just want to remind people of a quick little overview of sort of what evil lurks in the S&P 500. And I could have done this for the Canadian stock market, but I did it for the S&P 500. And these are just kind of like, I would say at the top of my list that remind you that if you're not being intentional about investing, if that you are investing sort of somewhat blindly when it comes to a military, when it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to tobacco. There's so many sort of terrible things lurking inside of your portfolio. So there are a lot of reasons why people want to switch advisors. I'm guessing that for our audience, this is sort of at the top of that list. That I'm sure there are other companies that people are really trying to avoid. If you want to throw them in the chat, companies that you are looking to avoid, always happy to hear about those companies. But just want to remind us that, this is kind of the big purpose. And that, when it comes to switching your investments, this can feel like a big move. That from where Darryl and I sit, it's not that hard to like get rid of those things from your portfolio and to invest sustainably, but it often feels really hard, especially if you're with someone. So we're just going to go through one by one, a few fears, common fears that people have. If I like hit something and you're like, Tim, this is exactly how I feel, like, please let me know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But I think, the biggest thing, rather than like a fear or a concern, is I think a lot of people just like don't know where to start. Like, this is like the biggest thing, is they realize that, oh no, there are probably some things in my portfolio, and they're just kind of like paralyzed, where they're just like, well, that sucks. How do I even start this process? How do I even think about switching? Darryl, is this sort of something you've come across? Would you say this is the most common reaction?
This is number one.
And it's it's confusing. I get it. That's why Darryl and I are here. We've got options for you. There are definitely ways to do it. But really, the first thing I think that people have is just like this uncertainty of like, I don't even know where to start. Another common fear that I always get is that it's going to be like hard to like break up with your advisor, that like this advisor that you've been working with, it's like your relationship with your parents or your uncle, that they're going to like yell at you and try to like talk you out of not leaving. I know I've talked to some clients, sadly, that have had really bad experiences with their existing advisor, where they've gone in the meeting and talked about sustainable investing or wanting to, get out of weapons or fossil fuels, and just they get like laughed at or they get made fun of. Like, it can be really bad. But there is definitely a power dynamic when it comes to, if you've got an existing relationship with an advisor. And sometimes, especially those people pleasers among us, I know who you are, I see you, that, it feels bad, thinking that you're going to have to like break up with your advisor. Darryl, is this something that you see a lot?
Yep. It is a relationship, in all fairness, or at least it ought to be sort of considered as such. But, well, I should say, it's also a professional relationship. So everyone needs to know that they have the agency and the independence to make the move that they feel is in the best interest of their objectives, their goals, their family's objectives and goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see your comment here. At the end of the day, it's your money. Like, right? That's absolutely the power dynamic. Yeah. And that's totally the vibe and the energy that I want you to have, is that it's your money. Let's be intentional about this. But I think going into it, it's like, sometimes it feels hard. It feels a little tricky. It feels a little awkward. Like, you're just kind of like, how do I approach this? But don't worry, we have you covered. We're going to address this. I think one thing that comes up a lot is people are really worried about taxes and the tax implications of switching your portfolio, that they're worried that they're kind of going to like mess it up in some way, shape, or form. We are going to sort of address this, that, for a lot of people, this actually isn't even going to be an issue. And obviously we can be smart about it. But Darryl, like, do you agree? Is this kind of like often a barrier for people who are thinking about switching?
Yep. And that's definitely top 5. We'll go into many of the reasons why for a lot of people it won't be an issue, and even if, and I shouldn't say issue, it's something to take note, and even if it is, it's not going to be something that will ruin your experience. It's just something to be aware of.
I think that's it. Like, it's not a barrier. It's not a deal. It's just, it is a reality, but we'll talk a little bit more about this. This one is the one that, like, I think a lot of people are like worried about this sort of like, they're going to mess up and the money's just going to like fall into a chasm and just like disappear in this process. Like, I do absolutely get concerns from a lot of people that are just like, I'm doing this. I'm just like, am I sending my money into the void? How do I know it's going to make it across there? Again, we are going to give you a nice step-by-step, but if there's anyone who's like worried about this or like feels this in the chat, by all means, throw it in there. I'd also just love, if there are any other concerns that people have, things that you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous about, I'm so worried about, Sometimes I hear these kind of like horror stories where people hear about their brother-in-law who went to switch their account and there was a problem, and they got dinged or there was an issue. I don't know if anyone's like, in the chat, if you have any of these stories, these reasons or these barriers, things that you're worried about when it comes to switching advisors or switching your money, please, I would love to hear about them. Throw it in the chat. We can absolutely address all these other things, anything else that comes up, if you do have specific concerns. But I think these are like the top ones that we've identified. Darryl, do you think I'm missing anything? Are there any in your top list that you're worried about?
The only one I would add is just finding the mental space to do it and the intentionality to do it, because it's an emotionally big undertaking. It's scary, so just carving out the time and space to focus on it is also a barrier for many people, especially people who are busy with family obligations.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good point. I think people are worried it's going to take a long time, that it's going to be really stressful, that it is going to be this intense thing. It's not, it often isn't. And especially if you've got guidance, if you've got help, then, but oh my goodness, I absolutely feel that one. I'm seeing a couple comments in here. Anne says costs and fees. I've switched investment advisors more than once, not recently. There were always fees involved in moving from one advisor to another. Absolutely. I think this is like these little hidden costs, and kind of worried about that. Darryl, do you agree with this?
Yes, we could potentially just carve out some time to talk about fees like DSCs, deferred sales charges.
Oh, deferred sales charges.
Which we still see.
And this is, these are the little like sales tactics, and always it's going to be like, it depends, if you're moving from one to another. But sometimes, an old advisor did sort of lock people in certain ways. And so we can talk about like ripping the Band-Aid off versus not. But that's a great point, and really, really appreciate that. And we're happy to get into that. If people have questions about fees and things like that, we can so get into that. Here we've got Amanda saying, when I told my advisor I'd like to change for lower fees, he explained he's getting far better returns, and I do worry he, at least last year, is right. So it's going to depend on this. I think performance is like a big thing, and it's like really understanding that, that there is, I think, often a perception that advisors are like worth their fees. And there are some situations where that is the case. But a lot of the time it's not. And especially if we're looking at that. But I think, can definitely get into that. This does speak a little bit about sort of like the first step is kind of, figuring out where you are going to land, that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But really, when it comes to this, it's important to understand that any investment fund that either drastically outperforms or drastically underperforms can be a bit of a red flag. That really what we're trying to do is to earn the sort of market rates of return. And there's no magic sauce when it comes to, to outperforming the markets. And we can talk about the green stuff and the sustainable stuff and how the performance there. But generally speaking, the goal is to earn about the same returns as you would otherwise. And that just know that, data is tricky, that I've seen a lot of people in this scenario where they're trying to like keep you as an advisor. They might sort of cherry pick and be like, oh, look at this 1 year where we did really well, not going further back to understand, what that average has been. Is that, do you get this like performance question a lot?
I get it, and I'll add that there can be performance improvements by switching. And there's a question or just a comment, and the worry about if you're restricting, which I wouldn't say that when you're moving to ethical or responsible investments, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are giving up returns. And in fact, your returns can be at the market, or plenty of times when they are better than the overall market. And so that's a real thing that I don't think is really talked about out there.
Yeah, the ethical stuff, sometimes it's going to be a little better, sometimes it's going to be a little worse, but our goal usually is to like track the benchmark as close as possible. Maybe we can do I could do a whole other webinar on like sustainable investments performance, and do they outperform, do they not? I would love to that could be a fun one. But let's get through. We have some more comments here. Vincent says, I've switched from seg funds, segregated funds, through an insurance advisor to the bank, and it was a bunch of work, but doable. For me, I'm always looking for ways to be blended, working with an advisor and having my own DIY to play with. And yeah, I think that, this is a good thing. Even DIY investors do have some help right? So just understanding that you're never like totally alone on this. And that, yeah, it can be kind of a pain in the butt, especially those segregated funds from you. But oh my goodness, you would have saved so much money by getting out of those. Juan is saying, excellent explanation, a great opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. But that, yeah, it really is, I can understand why people do have a lot of concerns around this, where it is important to talk. We don't make this switch lightly. And that, do want to make it clear that there is a pre-existing power dynamic where your existing advisor often does want to talk you out of making a switch. So all I would say is like the first step is always going to be sort of like shop around to figure out, the other places where you might land and then do a proper comparison. Right? Like, let's do that a little bit to be able to see, okay, has the performance been better? Has the performance been worse? To someone's point, what are those costs of switching? We do want to make sure that we're super transparent about that.
And while we're hanging out in the area and topic of fees, one thing I would say is that paying a fee is not always necessarily a bad thing. I think Tim and I have always been nicely aligned on the idea that, it's not a bad thing to pay someone to manage your investments for you. The question is, what value are you getting for the fees that you're paying? That's really the huge question. And the huge point of view is around value. If somebody's only calling you up once a year to be like, hey, are you making an RSP or TFSA contribution? Yes or no? And that's it. Then absolutely a move to something like a do-it-yourself investing strategy could make the most sense, because you're paying for a lot of money for nothing effectively. But I would also say that for some people, if that's not an option for them, then switching to an advisor that has a different perspective, a more holistic one that meets and talks about planning, goals, objectives, contributions, your family, generational wealth planning, all of those areas can be amazing reasons and provide a really fantastic support for any individual, and not just from the investing standpoint, from a much more holistic standpoint. There are reasons why paying a fee can make sense for people.
Totally. And this is like, I threw this image up just to be like, we're here for you, right? Like if you're worried about sort of bridging that gap, about making that switch, about being smart about it, absolutely happy to be able to talk you through. It's important to understand these implications and to wrap your head around it before you're ready to sort of like make the switch. You absolutely do that. But I want to be clear that you don't need to do it fully on your own. And I would just say, like, be aware of incentive structures, right? Like if you're talking to an advisor who wants to keep you, understand their incentive and what their incentive is going to be. If you're talking to Darryl, who would like love to have you as a client, like understand that he's going to have that bias, he's going to have that incentive. I'm kind of in a nice position where I get paid by the hour, so my incentives are a little bit more like, okay, let's be clear and transparent about this, and that, but really making it sure that you do understand that there are you're not doing this alone, that there is help. And that it can be pretty straightforward. Lauren says, my issue is not with paying my advisor. It's that the management company and fund managers also get a cut, and it ends up being a lot. And so, yes, again, this is the transparency here and understanding how those fee structures work. And, are you getting, to Darryl's point, are you getting value for the fees that you're paying? Because I can't tell you how often, and especially if you're someone who just like walked into a bank and bought mutual funds from the bank, like you're not getting the value that you ought to be for the fees that you're paying. And so shop around. Like this is where it's really, we're here to help you understand those options and to consider what's up there. Gail says, with DIY paralysis of investment partially as the market seems high and wanting to time the market. So these are some of the psychological things, and these are where like an advisor can be helpful, or certainly, I'm always happy to chat with you and to get a feel for the market and where we're at. Okay, so that was great in terms of some of the fears and the concerns. Now I want to switch to like the step-by-step, like how to actually switch. And this is where Darryl and I do offer two, different, but I would say very, sort of nicely sort of dovetailed perspectives, in that I'm really going to be talking about switching to a do-it-yourself approach using an online broker, right? Whereas Darryl's going to talk about the experience of switching to another advisor. So we're kind of assuming you're like with someone right now, you've got an advisor, whether it's mutual funds at the bank or you've got like an investment person that you're working with now. right? And that, really there are going to be the two paths of the DIY versus, working with an advisor. And this is kind of like the first decision you're going to have to make. This is the big one. And I've done some other work, and Darryl, maybe like if people in the chat want it, we can do another webinar in the future where we can really unpack the difference between DIY versus working with an advisor, because there are some trade-offs there and things to consider, and everyone's going to be different. But this is sort of like the number one step is to decide where you'll land. In my case, that means sort of choosing an online broker, whether you want to go with Questrade or with Wealthsimple or with Qtrade. I kind of have my preference about, what I think is the easiest way to do it. But regardless of whatever option you choose, it really is about, choosing that. Darryl, it's interesting because you've helped people kind of like make these decisions before, and now you're like working with a firm. What's your experience in like helping people figure out where they should land with their investments?
If I go back to, kind of the good old days, the good investing old days, the good old investing old days. If I go back to the clients that we were working with before, I would usually default to using the online brokerage that was attached to whichever bank that you were working with. They all have their own online brokerage platforms. I think the difference between them is small enough that it doesn't always make sense to jump to a separate bank and a separate fund company where you have to set up, it's more paperwork. So for ease of use, you can stick with your existing institution. I think that is a fantastic option. And oh, hello.
Oh, do we have a visit? Oh, hi.
We have one of my visitors who's escaped bedtime.
Oh, amazing.
And and then for some people, hang on one second.
Yeah, you're good. Miles is welcome to say hi if he wants to say hi to Uncle Tim.
Do you have any views on online brokerages?
Amazing.
Okay, so I would say stick with your own bank if you'd like to. I think that's the easiest way. Questrade, other than your own bank, is a fantastic platform that you and I both really, really enjoy. And then making the switch to another advisor, I think there's part of it is shopping around. And when I mean shopping around, it's not to look at the specific prices or the MERs or the fees, but searching for somebody or a firm who you believe can see you, who you are, what you're looking for when it comes to your goals and your values, and then really articulate a service offering. I think that's a really important part of that decision on figuring out where you're actually going to land.
And it is a relationship, right? Like if you're going to work with an advisor, it is like, as much as we kind of make the joke about breaking up with your, but there is a relationship there, and you want someone that you do vibe with, that you do trust, that you've got confidence in. I think that ideally someone who's sort of at a stage of life that can kind of see you through retirement. I know a lot of people get upset if they end up getting like passed around, between different advisors at the same firm. Yep. So someone that can really be there with you, for a while. And that I do love this idea of shopping around, that, if I'm going to take this relationship analogy, that you do get to have a bunch of first dates, right? Like you offer a free consultation, and that every manager, if you're above their sort of minimum investment threshold, then, they're going to give you a free consultation to be able to figure that out. So, definitely there is that kind of first date. Know what you're looking for, right? Especially in terms of sustainability, and, those can be deal breakers for you. But at the same time, there is going to be a bit of an instinct when it comes to this. Step number 2 is, so once you've decided who you're going to take to the prom, that's when you want to start by opening up your new accounts. So I always suggest starting with the accounts that you already have. So if you already have an RSP or a TFSA, start with that. If you have both, open both, right? We can always talk to you about if there are opportunities, for new accounts or different things. But I would just say a great starting point is just open the accounts that you already have at your new institution. Now, when it comes to the DIY approach, this is like, I have a YouTube video that walks you through. It is a little bit of a process. They're going to have to gather a whole bunch of information from you, right? You're going to go through that paperwork and sort of do the e-signatures for all of the agreements. Darryl, what's the experience if you are moving to like another advisor? What's the experience of opening new accounts like?
It's really twofold. The first part is setting up your identification, verifying who you are. And so we do that through gathering a few quick pieces of information. Name, address, date of birth. We do ask for your SIN number, and that's part of getting clearance through compliance,
Yep.
and also as part of reporting to Revenue Canada. So there's a number of identification parts that we do. Firstly, secondly, we do the same thing as what DIY investors would do. You effectively mirror the accounts that you already have investments in on our end. If you've got an RSP and a TFSA, we would set up those same accounts on our end. Nothing would move into them. It's just really setting up the bucket. And I think that's a great way to kind of think about that, is we're setting up the buckets to receive your investments once they do happen. And I'll just add in the third little piece of information.
Sure.
When people are ready to invest, it's really just as simple as knowing that account information on our end, and we handle everything. As long as we know the account information and the firm, we take care of all the back end stuff, which is going to be there we go.
Yeah, this
three.
is like, the third step, which is that, what we're going to do is we're going to initiate the transfers with your new institution. I've got that like bolded and underlined, because I can't tell you how many people get trapped because they try to like leave, they try to like break up with their advisor. And that's not how we do it. You want to like have your new spot, right? Have your new BFF. And then what we're going to do is open up those accounts, and then the new institution is going to request the transfer. And this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up here. And this is why it can feel like, oh no, we're going to miss the handoff, something like that. That no. Like, your new institution wants your money, whether it's an online broker or a new advisor, like they want your money. They are very much going to be sort of in your corner and will essentially be breaking up with your advisor for you. The formal process is that we're going to, fill out the forms, right? Initiate the transfer. So the language that gets used is we have what's called the receiving institution, which is the new institution. And then we have, the sending institution? Is that what it's called? I think the sending institution is like the old one. So the receiving institution is going to be your new home, your new landing place. They're going to file the paperwork with the old firm to then request those funds that transfer for you. So this is like one of the key things about understanding this. Don't try to like break up with your advisor. Instead, find your new place and get them to break up with their advisor for you.
Yeah. And if we can hang out here for one quick second, I'll actually just amend the description a little bit. It's not a request per se. So in our transfer forms, we figure out the account information, the client signs off on it, and that money is demanded. Right? Assuming all the information, as soon as all the information is correct, and and this is one of the areas which we'll go into in terms of hot tips, making sure that all the information is correct and accurate, because you can get rejections. But assuming that's okay, it's demanded. It goes off to the firm, and they are required to send that money. So you don't need to, and I think this is a really important thing to take away for people. You don't need to actually break up with your existing person. You don't have to talk to them at all. If you have a fantastic relationship with them, and as a courtesy, you want to give them a heads up, by all means, I think that's fabulous. We've done that so many times. And by and large, that we have really nice handoffs and send-offs from investment managers. Everyone mutually thanks each other for the work and just agree it's time for a different direction. But to be clear, you actually don't need to talk to them at all. You don't request the money. We demand it. It shows up.
That's
End
it.
of story.
That's it. Hyacinth, thank you so much for the topic, or for the question, the contribution here. Does take us off topic a little bit, but I'm so glad that you had a great experience with Wealthsimple Trade. What Wealthsimple is so good at is making this process easier, right? So I really, really love that, for you, that transfer process was so easy, right? And which was great. I'm absolutely thrilled. I do think they are sort of one of the best in the business at doing this. Roma asks, is there a fairly consistent minimum investment amount that financial firms require to work with one? So we can get to that, Roma. Every firm is going to be different. Darryl, with you at Genis, I think it's 100K. Do I have that right?
That would be about the minimum. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. I've got someone here did a question just to hosts and panelists. So you can always change in the chat and make sure you're sending it to everyone. But if you do send it just to me, it'll still show up on the video because I have this. But Jenna's specific question, I'm confused about the relationship with RBC. Would love more info on that. Yeah, absolutely. We can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A. Happy to go there. But that really, to me, what it comes down to is this final step here. So once we've sent the transfer documents, we've made the demand, not the request. I'll amend my language there. If you want, this is where we can send a courtesy email. So if you do have that advisor that you've been working with for a long time, once you've done that transfer form, this is when I would love, my preference is to kind of send that little courtesy email. I've helped my clients write this email before. If you need a little template to do this, you don't have to do this at all. This is like a courtesy. You can just, again, to Darryl's point, the transfer gets demanded, right? So it will happen whether they like it or not. But I do find this is the time when, especially if you want to advocate, if you're a little bit upset about the piece around about moving out, and you feel you don't want to leave that hanging, you don't want to just ghost them. You can totally ghost them if you want, but if you don't want to ghost them, I would suggest sending a little courtesy email just saying thanks for your help. But again, this is a time to be able to say, hey, I moved because I wanted to invest sustainably, right? And especially if they weren't able to help you with this, now's the time to let them know why you are moving. Whether it's higher fees, whether it's for ethical concerns, maybe it's both of them. But this is when, they tend to hear this feedback when a client is walking out the door. Anything you want to add to this, Darryl?
Nope. I think that's spot on.
Perfect. So then the last step number 5 is to wait. Right. And I know that sometimes it can happen faster, right? That I have had it go through in a couple days, especially if it's just sitting in cash. That said, sometimes if it's sitting in mutual funds or these segregated funds that someone mentioned a while ago, that to me, those are the things that do usually take that full 8 weeks. But this is where it does feel a little bit scary because it's often going to be leaving your old institution, and it does take a while. It is what it is that, this information often goes through the CRA, the financial industry. I like to joke they use, fax machines and carrier pigeons, but it often does take this 6 to 8 week transfer period. Darryl, anything to add to this? Just, this transfer period, it kind of sucks, but there's nothing we can really do about it.
Yeah, typically nowadays we're seeing registered accounts take a little bit longer, but still it's closer to about 2 to 4 weeks. We're seeing right now at the moment. We always counsel individuals for that 6 to 8, but really right now we're seeing closer to 2 to 4. So it's
nice.
Also a weird period where you actually do find value in working with a full service advisor. You wouldn't think this, but just even the who to call or finding a person to inquire about that status is not something that's particularly easy as an individual, and it's something our team does on an active basis. Maybe that's kind of why our sort of turnaround times are a little
faster. Could be.
But it does take a little bit of time typically. And for most financial services firms, it's going to be a few weeks or so, especially with registered accounts. With non-registered accounts, so if it's sitting in cash, high interest savings, and again, for people who are not familiar with the lingo, non-registered being not your RSP, not your TFSA. If it's outside of those accounts, typically the transfer window is much shorter.
A little faster if it's cash. Roma says, I find the online information reports with an advisor I've been working with not very helpful for someone who isn't an expert. Oh, I've seen some bad statements before. Yeah. Does Janice have a user-friendly online account portal? Maybe we can get into that a little bit later in the Q&A. I think that regardless of the sort of online portal, what's nice about Janice would be working with Darryl, that I'm sure Darryl would probably be a little more patient and, talk you through all of those reports a little bit more closely.
I can share some stories about bad investors. There's some statements that I have had to struggle to understand.
Really?
Yeah, there are some bad ones out there.
Some bad ones out there. All right. And then after the 6 to 8 weeks, the money arrives. That's when we get to party. That's really the sort of 5 steps is figure out where you're going to land, right? Open up your new accounts, initiate the transfer, wait, and then wait for the money to arrive. When the money does arrive, it feels so good, Right. It is so nice to be able to see it in your account, ready, knowing that you are going to invest more sustainably. That is when we sort of get that big win. We do have some hot tips for you. So we can go through these. That really, first one is take a clear photo of your ID. That I can't tell you how many times accounts, trying to open those accounts. And if it's a blurry photo, and then, as Darryl mentioned before, have your SIN handy, that social insurance number, that all of this stuff goes through taxes. Like, it's either going to be tax shelters like your RSP, TFSA, these registered accounts, right? In which case it's linked to your SIN number, to the CRA through that. Or if it's like an unregistered account, it's a taxable account, you're paying taxes on that. That's when all of this stuff, they really do need to know your tax information. So, making sure you do have that SIN card, that SIN number handy. Is that right, Darryl?
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. A little bit of language that can be helpful in the transfer process is understanding the difference between an in-cash transfer versus an in-kind transfer. This is one of these little words, the language can often get cause us little hiccups. That an in-cash transfer says that they're going to sell everything you currently own and it's going to get moved over as cash. Right? So that's in cash, is that everything gets sold, gets moved over as cash. An in-kind transfer is where they're going to try to move over your investments as is. So if you're invested in a mutual fund or if you're invested in stocks, then they're going to try to move those stocks over to the new account at the new institution and leave everything invested in the market. I find that in-kind transfers can sometimes be problematic, that sometimes they get caught with the new thing, that, we can do them for certain reasons and sometimes it makes sense in certain contexts, but most of the time, especially if we really want to make sure that the transfer does go through sort of quickly and seamlessly, that most of the time I do suggest doing an in-cash transfer. Darryl, anything you want to add to this difference between the in-cash versus in-kind?
Really much more of a decision when you have a non-registered account that may have capital gains.
We're going to talk about taxes in a moment.
Okay.
Don't spoiler, you're getting ahead of me.
Okay.
But yeah, okay.
Right, I'll leave it for now.
Okay, perfect. Amanda says, is a TFSA to TFSA transfer still in cash? So this is so important to clarify, Amanda. This is really, really, really important, that it's always going to be TFSA to TFSA. Okay, that whenever we're doing these transfers, it's always going to be from whatever account it is at the old institution. We're going to open up the same account at the new one, and it's going to be going there. It has to be TFSA to TFSA, RSP to RSP. Okay, that said, that transfer itself can either be in cash or in kind. So if you hold a mutual fund in your TFSA and you want to shift it to a DIY account where you want to do it yourself, that you're going to want to start by opening the new TFSA, doing this transfer. If you do it in kind, it's going to try to stay in that mutual fund, but that can sometimes cause a problem, and so it gets rejected because the new place can't hold that mutual fund or something like that. So that's why I often suggest that in cash means they're going to sell the mutual fund inside of your TFSA. The cash stays inside your TFSA. That cash is going to be transferred over to your new TFSA so that it's ready to invest. So that really this is why in cash tends to be a little bit easier, that just by doing cash, I tend to see less issues, less problems when we do an in cash transfer. But I want to be clear that we're always moving it from the same account to the same account, and it's always staying within that account. Right? So, okay, perfect. And then Laura asked, does in cash mess with the principles of investing, keeping your investment steady over long term? Oh, that's such a great question, Laura. That when it comes to this, I want to keep in mind that, it just sucks because when we do an in cash transfer, there is a little bit of a gap where you're not invested in the market. Right? So, if I transfer my investments and they sell them on, whatever it is, today's April the 9th, right? It might take a couple of weeks before it arrives and I'm ready to reinvest it. And unfortunately, it does suck. I'm out of the market for those 2 weeks. Now, most of the time, those 2 weeks, it's not much is going to happen, right? It's kind of 50-50. Might be up, market might go up a little, market might go down a little, doesn't really matter. The goal for a long-term investor is to stay invested in the market as long as we can. So we want to minimize that window, but I want to be clear that if we're selling it while the market is high, we're also going to be buying while the market is high. And if we're selling when the market is low, we're also going to be buying when the market is low. So this is part of that long-term strategy. We're still going to do that. We do want to minimize that gap. Like if we can, this is where like it depends, and we can talk about in kind that sometimes that does make sense for some of those reasons. But really, the goal here is that you're making a switch either for fees or for ethics or for both. And what we want to do is get you to a new place as quick as we can to get your money back in the market as quickly as we can.
Tim, I want to just take another few seconds, and I really actually like this question the more I think about it.
Yeah.
And in terms of the principles of investing, one huge one that I put at the forefront is understanding and connecting your investments to whatever your intended purposes or goals are. And for people, sometimes that can change. It might not just be their goals, it could be their employment. If you have a shift in employment, or if you have a shift in financial circumstances, if you have a breakdown in your relationship, or if you are forming a relationship, these are big enough life events that it can sometimes make sense, alongside moving your investments, to pause and take stock of where you're at and ensure that you are selecting the right destination that makes the most sense. Probably that destination is a continuation of the same investment approach that you had before.
Yeah.
But it is okay, to be clear, it is okay to take a time out from investing, especially when you have big changes in life circumstance, and big changes being employment, relationship status, family situations, generational wealth transfer. These are big enough things where I think that it could warrant a pause in your investment approach, if that investment approach is also affected, or sorry, if that investment approach is affected by those other lifestyle circumstances that are happening.
Absolutely. And so your question, Laura, does that mean you're reinvesting the market from scratch? Does that impact your timing in the market? No, we're not trying to time the markets here. So there's no like better time to do the transfer. If you have to do it in cash, something like that, we don't know what's going to happen over the next little while. This isn't trying to time the market. Really, this is about finding the best home, the best long-term home for your money, to prevent having to like switch around very often. Right. And that's why, really what we want to do is to sell and then be able to buy back as quickly as we can, to be able to, have as much time in the market as possible. The in-cash sale will result in capital gains. I hear that's coming next. Yes, we're going to get to taxes, I swear. Doesn't making the transfers in cash trigger a bunch of transaction fees? So this is where, we can get into this a little bit, and this is going to be a big, fat, it depends question, Robin, where it depends how many different things you own, where they are at your existing institution. If there is a transfer fee there, then, or a fee to sell there, then yeah, we might. Generally speaking, when I do the math on this, normally the transaction fees here are very minimal. Right. And then as well, this is the type of thing where if it is going to be high, that's something that working with me or working with Darryl, we're going to identify that ahead of time. We're going to give you a heads up. Sometimes there are these fees. I'm less worried about the cost. It's going to like $10 to like sell a mutual fund or to sell a stock, right? Is very rarely going to have a huge impact on it. There are sometimes these things that Darryl mentioned before called deferred sales charges, DSC. This is like the thing that we hate more than anything else, because this is like trapping investors in that fund, and you have to like pay a penalty. And this is usually because like, frankly, your advisor is like kind of a jerk. Like really, to me, it's like there was a choice that they put you in these funds that keep you locked in. So with these transaction fees, it's very rare that it's going to be zero. Sometimes it's usually a very small amount. Usually it's absolutely worth it to like rip off the Band-Aid and to do it to like get your money in a new home, especially if we're lowering your annual fee, then, don't be sort of, this is, what is it, penny smart, but pound foolish. Sometimes people worry about these little like nickels and dimes on the transaction fees, but then that means that because they don't take action, they end up staying with an advisor that's charging them a really, really high percentage every single year. Do I have that right, Darryl? Yeah. Sarah says, my transaction fees were covered by Questrade. Hyatt said, fees were covered by Wealthsimple. right? So this is where, like, see what options are available to you, depending on what you're going to do with it. Usually this shouldn't be a barrier, although I know often it is, and that we often have these little tips and tricks to be able to, minimize those costs as much as possible. The next one is, this is what everyone was talking about with taxes and capital gains. So this is a big fear when we talk about selling our investments over here and moving them over here to buy ethical investments, right? And so, at first I want to be clear that inside of a registered account, and Darryl already explained this, but this is anything like an RSP or a TFSA or an RESP. Like, if there are a bunch of letters, there's an acronym here, it's probably a registered account. And these are all tax shelters, meaning that there are zero tax implications of moving this to a new advisor. None. The only time we have to worry about taxes is when it comes to what's called an unregistered account. This is often what's known as a taxable account. Sometimes they call it a cash account in certain places. But this is all like where we are paying taxes. And this is where we do need to be smart about making this shift. And this is why working with me or working with Darryl, we can go over this with you to be like, hey, are there going to be taxes if we switch? And if so, let's understand what those are. Let's be transparent. There's no way to avoid paying those taxes. Some people are like, oh, I'll leave it where it is. No, like, you're going to have to pay those at some point. But again, we're going to want to give it some thought. It's going to be an it depends situation. We can help you do the math, figure out what those taxes are, right? Be transparent about that. This shouldn't be a barrier for you to switch, especially from unsustainable into sustainable investments, right? I don't want this to be a barrier, but it is a consideration, but only if, like, you're at a point where you've got all of your registered accounts maxed. Most of us, like, I'll speak for myself, like, I don't have an unregistered account. I still have lots of room in my RSP and TFSA. So for me to switch, there would be zero tax implications. Darryl, do I have this right?
Exactly right. And a question from Anne, would a RIF be also the same, a registered retirement income fund? And yes, that is correct.
Yes, that is a registered retirement income fund. That first R stands for registered. So that's definitely a registered account. So there would be no taxes in terms of switching your RIF. Awesome. Because I know that's a barrier. The last hot tip that I have is just, like, be a squeaky wheel. That this is, and I think, Darryl, you mentioned this is something that you kind of do at Genesis, that you've got a team there to be able to, be proactive, reaching out, making sure it happens. When it comes to DIY, if it, keeping an eye on it, this is sort of the squeaky wheel gets the grease is the expression that we use. And that if you are worried that it's taking a little bit too long, then, be a squeaky wheel, call it, find out what's going on. But to be clear, be a squeaky wheel with your receiving institution, with the new firm that you are with. You want to be a squeaky wheel with the new firm, and then get them to be a squeaky wheel to figure out what's happening with the old firm and why they're dragging their toes. But that is, if you do want to sort of advocate for yourself in this process, it really is about being a squeaky wheel with your existing firm. And Darryl, it sounds like to me with switching to another advisor, like, that's something that you guys can kind of handle.
Oh yeah, it's an amazing job that our client services team does, which is just staying on top of transfers, notifying clients if something has been rejected or there needs to be amendments. It's easy to get a hold of them. It's not a gigantic, sort of corporate entity with tens of thousands of people and like a call center environment. It's just really direct and to the point. And so, yeah, that's one of the nice things about transitioning
Absolutely.
to Genesis.
Absolutely. Okay, how are we doing here? This is the bulk of the content. Would really just want to stop for a moment and just, like, take a breath, take a beat, and just, like, ask people in the chat, like, is this helpful? How are you feeling? Are there other, like, specific questions about transferring? Awesome. I'm getting a thumbs up. It's so helpful. Amazing. I'm so glad. Awesome. Some fire emojis and a rocket ship. Great. Okay. This is awesome. Okay. Amazing. I'm really happy we were able to do that. We do have a little more content for you, and a couple exciting things. I realize it's the top of the hour, so we're going to keep going here. And really want to make sure. There was a question from Gail here. Oh, my newsletter discuss social investments. Will you have time to discuss this? Give me another little bit. I do want to go through. I've got a little gift for you that I want to give, and I've got a couple things that, in terms of a call to action. But absolutely happy to talk about those in the Q&A if people do want to stick around. But really, want to remind us again, sort of why we're doing this, right? Which is just getting rid of these companies. Let's just get them out of our portfolio. This is something that you're going to feel so good. And oh no, my photo of Jacqueline isn't working. Oh, there she is. Let's see if I can get that. Will it work? It doesn't like it there. Okay, I've got Jacqueline here. I just wanted a couple little testimonials. Here's Jacqueline. I just want to reiterate how good it feels to get your money out of those portfolios. That really, she's been saying I've been wanting to get into investing and especially sustainable investing for a long time, but I felt confused and a bit nervous about where to start. I feel so much more courageous when it comes to investing and excited to use my money to invest in a positive and just future. Jacqueline works for a really cool organization called Talk Climate to Me, helping people really understand climate change and how to talk to their friends and colleagues. Melina, I spoke to her. These are two people I spoke to like last week. She just set up her first portfolio, feels beyond empowered, feel like she learned a new language. A lot of what we've been doing tonight is learning some of the new language around this. I'm so happy to know how I'm now investing for a sustainable future. I just want to underscore how good it feels to actually do this and to take action. Has anybody switched to sustainable investments? How did it feel when that transfer actually went through, right? And you were able to actually invest sustainably, right? Really love. Yeah, Gail, absolutely. I remember when you went through that process and were able to actually make the investments for the first time. It just feels so gosh darn good. So I just want to remind people that there is sort of a bit of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here, that, that yes, we do have to go through this process, setting up the account, doing the transfer. I know it feels a little tricky, but absolutely will help you get there. And it feels so good once you get there. From there, I do have a little gift for everyone who attended this workshop, basically looking at different things. And what I want to do is make a donation to a charity or a nonprofit. I don't need a charitable receipt for this, so it can be mutual aid. It can be whatever we want. But for every live attendee, for everyone who's on here right now, I see we've got like 43 people in the audience. I'm going to donate $10 to a nonprofit or a charity. That's going to be like $430. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to give $1 for every YouTube like, comment, and subscribe. So you can get like $3 if you do all three. I'll add $3 to the tally. I'll do this between now and the end of the week. So like Sunday at midnight can kind of be the deadline. What I would love is just in the chat to know what your favorite nonprofit or charity is. That, we'll look at the YouTube comments, we'll look at the YouTube chat. If you want to be able to do this, just throw in your preferred organization. I know for me, like World Central Kitchen is an organization that's really been sort of on my mind and in my heart lately. So that would sort of be my vote, but I would love to hear organizations that you really want. Sarah just did one amazing, throw it in the chat. Doctors Without Borders. I would love, oh my God, goodness, what a great organization. Feel free to give like little emoticons if someone posts an organization that you love. Carfax, Canadian Artist Representation, amazing. Feel free to give a little emoticon, kind of like voting for these different organizations. 541 Eatery and Exchange, local to Hamilton, Ontario, amazing. Julie, thank you so much. Darryl, is there an organization that's kind of top of mind for you right now?
Not top of mind right now. I've always been a huge fan of Not Far From the Tree. So it's Toronto's tree harvesting program. And so there's quite a lot of produce that is grown in the city. People in the city kind of know it. And so I think it's an amazing program. A third goes to the volunteers, a third goes to local food banks and charities, and a third goes to the homeowners. So I think it's an amazing way to just gather up. And, there's so much sort of food that goes to waste. Food insecurity is a huge problem.
My goodness, such a huge issue.
Yeah,
And there's so much
I
fruit
really
around. I
appreciate
love
that.
Not Far From the Tree. They're amazing. Christy recommends UNRWA over World Central Kitchen and Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, right? So many good ones. Environmental Defense Fund, Waterloo Habitat for Humanity, Heart and Stroke, Community
They're
Bike
all
Shop,
amazing.
amazing. Second, Doctors Without Borders, another for Not Far From the Tree. Okay, Amnesty International, UNRWA, amazing. Okay, so we're gonna we'll go through these. I don't know if we're gonna donate to every organization, but I will send up a follow-up email just with the receipts. I'll make sure that we absolutely do get to this. But just by attending, thanks to you being here, we're gonna do a little bit of good. We're gonna send $10 to an awesome organization just for watching on YouTube. If you can give me that sort of subscribe, comment, then we'll send a few more bucks to some of these amazing organizations. Kind of before we start to get into the kind of next steps, just want to throw it to you. Really, what is the world that you want to retire into? Robin says, Raven, respecting Aboriginal values and environmental needs. Amazing. I'm so excited to go through this list and just kind of look at all of them. But really, this is the question that I have for you, is that we all have these savings goals, whether it's retirement, whether it's your kids' education. And I just want to put a little bit of good energy out there that, that what is this world that you want to retire into? Throw it in the chat, or feel free just to close your eyes and have a moment. That really, to me, this is about linking our investments with our values. And I think as much as we talk about financial planning and retirement goals, I think it's equally important to talk about, what is that world that we want to retire into? Awesome. Perfect. So who's ready to switch? Chad, I'm looking at you. Let's, if you're ready to do this, if this is something that you've been meaning to do for a while and ready to do that, then I want to show you how to do that, because we have two very clear call to actions that it's very, very simple. If you want to do this with me, I would love if you want to learn a little bit more about my work and how I help with clients, and especially if DIY is the path for you, then I just want you to go to my website, goodinvesting.com, and book a free consultation. Sarah says, freedom and justice for all. Christy says, I want to live in a just and honest world full of respect, love, and care for all beings and creatures. That just resonates so hard. I want to live in that world too, and I want our investments to help towards that. So if you do want to sign up for a free consultation, I did open up some slots in the next couple days. It's just really easy. You can just go in, right? You can give me your number, and that you can sign up for a free consultation. I'll just do it so that you can see exactly what it likes. Feel free to do this along with me, right? I currently have investments. I've got these 4 accounts are the ones that I've got here. And then it was the webinar, and this takes me to the book, my meeting page, where you can see that I do have slots available even this week. So tomorrow and Thursday, I've opened up for the next, usually it's, a week or 2 ahead, but I've opened up slots specifically if people want to book a meeting with me, right? You can just do it right away, right? I'm going to go ahead and book myself. I'm going to say next Monday. I'm going to give myself a little break at 2:30, and I'm going to book a meeting with myself. But just to show you how easy it is to be able to book a free consultation, right? I confirm my booking, and boom, this is it. My appointment's now booked. Would really love to meet so many of you, whether you're watching live, watching on YouTube. Go to goodinvesting.com and book a free consultation with me. Darryl also offers free consultation, so I'm going to do the same thing for him. Darryl, I'm going to book a little meeting with you. I'm just going to do the same thing here, right? Just so that we've got it, so that people can see how easy it is to book a meeting with Darryl, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do this, and really want to encourage people, if you do want to chat with Darryl, just go on his site. It's very similar. He's got some availability. I'm going to look at your next Friday at 10 a.m. We can have a little chat, Darryl, right? Here we go. I'll do my Tim at goodinvesting.com, right? There we go. That way I've booked in with Darryl. Would really love people to book a free consultation. Please go ahead and do that now. Don't wait. The slots are going to fill up. If you want to book a free consultation and you do it right now, throw it in the chat. Let us know that you've done it. Really, really, really appreciate everyone. And just know that Darryl and I are here for you, that we're both willing to give you a free consultation, talk through your situations, and, see whether this does make sense. So from there, I'm just going to wrap up here with the conclusion that I just really want to reiterate. Number one, it's easy to switch your investments. It's very, Vincent, amazing. See you tomorrow. I'm so happy.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If other people can want to book a free consultation, I would just so love to chat with you. Really want to make it clear. It's pretty easy to switch your investments. It's not as scary as people think it is. Like, it's pretty gosh darn easy, especially if you've got me, if you've got Darryl, like, we'll look over your shoulders. We'll make sure it gets done right. Just know that it's like easier than you think. Yes, there are some things to think about but those things shouldn't be barriers, right? That really what we want to be able to talk through those things. Mila booked a nice a meeting. I'm so glad. Vincent, amazing. Really, I'm so looking forward to chat with you. The second thing I want to reiterate is the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. That really, when it comes to this, that so often, we wanted to do this earlier and we have that. Do it today. Book a free consultation. Plant that tree. Let's get this sorted out. We're going to be really smart about it. This is going to be great. And the last thing is really that we are here to help. That know that you can always reach out. We're happy to answer your questions. Really Juan booked as well. Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so happy seeing this. Is there a link you can give us for the consultation with Darryl? Yes, absolutely. I can't believe I didn't put the links in I was supposed to do that, Darryl. So, okay. So for me right now, I'll put it in the chat. There we go. That's where you want to do it. For Darryl, I can absolutely put it in here. So it's going to be, here we go. Here's the link for Darryl. I'll put these in the YouTube comments. So if you are watching this after the fact, I'll make sure that those two links are there so that we're good to go. From there, really happy to be able to move on to the Q&A. Let me just do the little transition back here. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Happy to stick around for a Q&A. It's a little past the hour, but I'm here for a little bit. Darryl, hopefully you don't have anywhere that you need to be right now.
I'm free. The kids are in bed. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much. I'll kind of, wrap up the official thing. If people need to take off, that's great. Really, really happy to be able to answer any of your questions that you've got. I am going to ask that they go in the chat. Oh, I guess there's a little Q&A bar as well as here. And then, but I would strongly prefer if we can do it in the chat. That would just be great so that just everyone can see them on the screen, because that's what I've got there. So Anne says, thanks. Good food for thought. I would love to switch, but I'm affiliated with a family arrangement with a particularly large company investment firm. I will have to wait until the circumstances are right, but thanks for the ideas. I get this all the time, Anne, and absolutely, if it's like a family thing, the relationship, I totally get it. That said, I would still just say is oftentimes I hear people think they're getting a deal, think they're getting a family deal, when oftentimes they're actually not. And that really shopping around is never a bad idea. Obviously, if they're family, if there's a dynamic there, it can be tricky. Know that, when the time is right. But all I would say is that in my experience, it's a very common tactic that advisors use, that they create this power dynamic where they think they're doing you a favor, when in fact, you are paying fees and you're not always getting that value. Darryl, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there, but those family pressures.
I would love to add that even though it may not be feasible to make a switch in the near term, what both Tim and I can offer is empowerment to be a better client and a more engaged client in those situations. And they can be very confusing, very loaded. It is the most loaded hangout, family and money, so loaded. And so we see it all the time. It's extremely intimidating. It's got all the baggage, the most baggage. So please, I would absolutely recommend reaching out to either one of us just so we can hang out and sort of walk you through that situation. And
Yeah.
maybe there are things that we see that may not have been presented or have not been made
Yeah.
available to you.
And that's a great
Absolutely
point.
be advocates.
You have to advocate for yourself, right? Like this is part of it, is that it's often like when we are dealing with the healthcare system where, if you're a patient, you have to advocate, or having someone to advocate for you is so important in those situations. And if you are sticking with your existing advisor, if you do want to have the conversation about sustainability, oftentimes you can sort of stay put and still make your investments more sustainable. And that's the work that I can do. And I know Darryl would be happy to chat with you about that in terms of how to best advocate for yourself within an existing advisor. Laura asked, does Wealthsimple count as DIY? I'm already with them, but would ideally like to move to something more ethical than their socially responsible index fund. Laura, yeah, I can totally help you with that. You're going to want to set up a free consultation with me. I can totally help you do this. I've often helped clients move from Wealthsimple has what's called Wealthsimple Invest versus Wealthsimple Trade. And Wealthsimple Invest is like their robo-advisor, and I have feelings about their robo-advisor offering. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. So definitely what we can do is switch you over to Wealthsimple Trade, right? Which is like very easy and is easier than moving to a different institution, but that would allow you to build a sort of custom portfolio and do it in a way that really aligns with your values. So yeah, if you want something more ethical than their like socially responsible fund, then we can totally do that. I've helped a number of people through that before. Okay. Amanda says, my question might be a bit too specific. Sorry. I love these questions. Nothing is too specific. Absolutely happy. My investments are currently in an open account, mutual funds, with an advisor with fees too high, and I want to move them to a DIY TFSA. Awesome. I support this. But I don't know if I should move open to TFSA, then transfer, or just transfer straight out of the open account. Does it even matter? Now, okay, so you're talking about something here called an open account. Now, I don't really know that expression. I would assume that this is like an unregistered or a taxable account. Darryl, have you ever heard it referred to as like an open account before?
Not really. I've not heard that expression.
Yes, unregistered. Okay, Amanda, thank you for clarifying. So yes, so in this case, I'll be honest, it doesn't even matter, right? Like it really doesn't matter. Either one is better. It's if you have room inside of your TFSA, if you've got room inside of these tax shelters, we want to get it in there right away, right? So to me, it's like absolutely you're going to want to do both things, which is get it inside of a TFSA at a DIY platform, right? So you're going to want to do, it doesn't really matter the order in which you do it. All I would say is that in this case, this is actually one of the few times, I rarely suggest doing this, but this is one of the few times where it might actually make sense to pull your money out of the investment advisor to your bank account, that might be faster. And then you can put it right into a TFSA at the DIY broker. That would be the fastest way. That would escape that sort of 6 to 8 week period. My fear is that you like put it into the TFSA, that advisor like puts it into mutual funds for you, like while you're not looking, and then initiates the transfer. And then it takes like 6 to 8 weeks to go through. Whereas because it's all unregistered, it might actually be able to, you might actually be able to just withdraw it to like a checking account and then do it from a checking account to your new TFSA. Darryl, do I have that right?
I was just going to, yep, absolutely. This is a situation where you will want to take note of taxes because it is in an unregistered account. And so the quick and easy way to do that is on your statement. There's plenty of information on there. Look for book value and look for your market value and compare the two. If your market value has increased, your book value is what you purchase your investments at. Hopefully your investments have gone up in value, and so the market value will be a little bit higher, but that represents what's called embedded capital gains. They're there, they're not realized because you haven't sold anything yet, but if you were to sell, then that would trigger some amount of capital gains. So
that's right.
What we do, both Tim and I do in this situation, is just take a look at that and help start to narrow down prospectively what, if any, capital gains would need to be added to some client's income. There you could be in a loss position alternatively. And so these are all things to note, not barriers,
Yeah,
but things to
it
note
depends.
before actually moving.
And this is, since anytime we are moving these unregistered accounts, talking with someone ahead of time and doing a little bit of math, this is, again, it shouldn't be a barrier, but it should be sort of a little thoughtfulness exercise. Let's understand any of those tax implications, and then we can, figure out the way to do it best for you. Gwillem says, would like to discuss with both of you to understand what is best. Amazing. I think that's great. You can absolutely double dip with both of us, but we'll first take your input to prepare for consults. So this is a great question, Darryl. How would you love for someone to prepare for a free consultation with you?
Having their investment statements is usually helpful. It can be pieces of information, and clients come super well prepared, but there might be specific information that they just don't have at their fingertips. So they might say a number in terms of how much money they have. Well, is that a single account? Is it a few different accounts? Is it just them, or is it them and a partner who are so having that extra information is definitely really helpful to get to more concrete answers in those meetings.
Yeah, I think having a statement or your logins, right? Like having that kind of ready to go so that you're not fumbling for passwords when we're meeting together can be nice if you are comfortable showing us, right? From there, the big thing is in my mind is kind of like understanding what you're trying to achieve with this. Like, is it to make it more sustainable? What is the motivation? What is the impetus for the switch? Kind of giving us that clear picture of where you're at and kind of what you're trying to achieve with this. From there, we'll be able to take a look at things. We'll identify any of the, yellow flags, orange flags, red flags, things that you should consider before doing this. And then really being able to, just to be thoughtful about that. From there, honestly, you don't really need to prepare much. We do this so often that, we kind of have our process, the questions to go through. Some of the things that you might want to ask would be around, if you do have specifics around, things that you really want to make sure that you avoid, absolutely happy to be able to go through that with you. Okay, Rena asks, what could I do if I have an RSP with employer matching? Ooh, good question. I like this one. Okay, Darryl, it seems you reacted there. Do you want to take a stab at it?
Well, I'm going to offer the worst financial or investing answer, but the most ubiquitous one, which is it depends. And it depends on the program, what options exist and what they allow employees to do. In many cases, there are a lot of restrictions in terms of what can be done with that employer matching plans. So that's something that we can look into, but I wouldn't be able to say one way or the other without knowing the specific employer. Perhaps there could be a sustainable option there that may work. Many times that isn't the case.
I know.
What's marketed as sustainable or whatnot is not good at all. So it depends. That's
I find a lot of the RSP matching programs are with the insurance companies. So like the Canada Life, the Great West Life, the Manulife, and they tend to be some of the most frustrating to deal with. So Rena, my suggestion, happy to chat about it with you more, but usually what I do is I send you to HR with the question, and that question is, am I allowed to transfer out? And are there limits on how long it has to stay? And that oftentimes the most common answer I get is that you really only want to do it sort of like once a year, that it often has to be in there for a year before you can transfer it. But then there are some funny rules. It does, to Darryl's point, it depend. So usually what we do is what we want to do. This process is very similar, but before we do anything, we do want to check with HR just to make sure that you don't run afoul of any of those rules. Okay, Gail says, I'm a bit paralyzed to decide among the impact investments as less info on the differences amongst them. So, I'm happy to go through those impact investments, Gail. I think I'm going to end up doing more webinars where we look at them more closely. So if you're doing some paralysis right now, I would just say maybe sit tight for a little bit. Either we can set up a meeting and chat one-on-one, or I'm going to be doing sort of more detailed. I did an email blast today that did have sort of like a few new impact investments that are on the market. These are things like community bonds. that there are a few. Let me go through these questions, and then maybe what I can do is just at the end, I am happy to be able to kind of go through those latest and greatest, but I do want to stay with questions just in terms of transfers, and just to make sure that anyone that has questions about transferring your investments, because you know me, I want to talk about impact investments so badly, but you also know that once I open that can of worms, we're probably going to nerd out a little bit. So let me just see this. Heinz says the fact that Amanda's advisor let her keep her money in an unregistered account when it seems she has TFSA contribution is very telling on the quality or the absence thereof of the advice she received. I completely agree with that comment, that yes, that if we have room in our tax shelters, we absolutely want to use those tax shelters, if it's available. Perfect. This is Amanda. I agree. This was the start of the, oh no, I need to switch journey. I started months ago. I'm in the camp of being frustrated. I let this go for this long. That's okay, Amanda. The best time to plant a tree, right, was before. The second best time is today. We're going to get you sorted out. Sarah, my employee match RSP has to be there for 2 years. Oh, Sarah, you know the answer to that. Amazing. Okay, so then what that means is that you can just get into a schedule, and where it's like you can move over, you can do what's called a partial transfer. It's a little bit awkward on how to do this. This is one of these it depends questions where set up a free consult with me. I can show you how to do it. I've done this a whole bunch, but basically what you're going to want to do is it has to be there for 2 years. Right. And so that in sort of 2 years, or in really, I guess it's like in like 3 years, you can move 1 year's amount. And then every year you get a new year that you can move over. Now, there's sometimes our little fees with this, so we're going to want to be careful about that. But I've absolutely helped people kind of figure out how to do this on a recurring basis, and I'm happy to do that. Never too late to move on. Good on you, Amanda. Absolutely. That's the right attitude. We really appreciate that. That's the end of the questions that I see right now about this. Gail, I'm happy to nerd out a little bit on some of the impact investments. If people want to stick around for that, I'm going to talk about a very sort of like niche part of this market. Darryl, I'd love if you could stick around. And that way, what I can do is just transition back to the screen share. And so that for those of you who haven't been added to my email yet, because you will get added automatically, but I sent out an email today and it pointed towards my free resources here and my list of impact investments. And so these are my list of available retail impact investments in Canada. I want to be clear, these are not stocks. These are not bonds, right, that are traded on the stock market. These are not things that are publicly traded. These are bonds and co-ops that we are doing directly with nonprofits and co-ops. So this is like not so much the doing less evil side of the equation. This is the doing more good side of the equation. And this is really like the crunchy granola side of that doing more good piece of the puzzle. So I'm just going to come up to the question here. Perfect. So that really what it comes down to is that I did add, 3 of them launched. So Indwell. Indwell is an organization that's been around for a very, very, very long time. And they've been doing affordable housing. I know them. If I just go to their main site, I know them because they've done some projects in London, Ontario, which is my hometown. So the one that I know really well is this one, the Embassy Commons on Dundas Street. So this is, when I grew up, this was like a venue, a music venue. Like I saw Serial Joe here for any old school Canadian punk. But it was like a dodgy venue with an even dodgier hotel above the venue. So this was it was bad. I remember friends staying there and there were bullet holes in the rooms and it was a rough sort of, hotel. So what they did is they renovated it and they turned it into 42 units for people who are very, very vulnerable. So who require housing support, who are struggling with addictions, who might require nursing, right? Who need active recreation and, maybe some psychosocial supports. Okay. So this is really, in my mind, Indwell is on the side of affordable housing, which is people struggling with homelessness, right? Building these amazing projects. Now, we obviously need more of this. I think we can all agree this is a massive problem, a huge issue. So how do we build more affordable housing? The answer is community bonds. So they've just launched now. Indwell used to have investments. It was called a promissory note. So it was like a loan to them, but it was a $50,000 minimum. So I had a couple clients that would be able to do it where, you know, that would be a small enough part of their portfolio. Most of us, like 50K for a community bond is, you know, way too much, way too big a slice of the pie. So, you know, I'm so happy that they've been able to reduce that. That we can see that, you know, some really, really cool information. They're raising $5 million. We can see the different series here. So they do offer sort of Series A, Series B, C, and D, right? I would sort of always start at the low end of the sliding scale. This is $1,000 minimum. It's a 3-year bond, so your money is locked in for 3 years. It pays 3.5%, which is below market rate. Like I can get a GIC or a high interest savings account that pays me more than 3.5%. So I do want to be clear that all of these impact investments are what we call, the term we use is concessionary investments. We are accepting a lower return and or a higher risk. In this case, we're accepting both. That this is a lower return than a GIC, which is guaranteed, and it's also a higher risk that we're loaning money to a nonprofit here. That said, we do get those nice warm fuzzies. So there are some big warm fuzzies when it comes to Indwell because they do some amazing work. If you've got a bigger portfolio, you could go for the Series B at $5,000 minimum in 3 years, 4%. The bond Series C is 10K minimum. The only bonus for this is that you can, you know, it is eligible for registered accounts, but there are fees associated with this. So we're going to want to talk about whether this makes sense for you or not, because then oftentimes it's like, you know, it only makes sense if you invest quite a bit more than 10K. So, you know, I'd want to talk to you about that. And then, you know, if you do have more to invest, you can do the Series D, which is 4.5% at 25K minimum. So really, really cool organization. Oh, look, they even have the little Series E, which is 5% for 5 years, but that 50K minimum, which is what I was used to before. So, you know, really, really cool organization. They're building projects in Hamilton, although you can invest in it if you live anywhere in Canada. From there, option number 2, Kensington Market Community Land Trust. So how many people know Kensington Market? Any market goers in the chat? I love Kensington Market. This is one of my favorite neighborhoods in Toronto. Really, really cool, very vibrant, super diverse. It's like, it's just cool. It's weird. It's funky. There's just a lot of my favorite shops. I just love walking around there. Really, really cool place. The issue in Kensington Market is gentrification. Right? And Darryl, you live in the Junction, right? So you know about gentrification. I live near Regent Park in St. Jamestown, so I know about gentrification. These neighborhoods are changing, and they're changing quickly. And this is a bit of a problem. So the question is, how do we keep Kensington Market weird and cool and vibrant? And the way we do it is through something called a community land trust. So community land trusts are nonprofits, by the community, for the community, with the community, where they are trying to buy land. These are community-led initiative that is trying to buy property in Kensington Market. They are actually trying to acquire a second property, right? They're raising $2 million to buy their second property. And really it's about keeping it affordable. Right? So many people, like, yeah, it's the investments, you know, it goes towards keeping Kensington Market, you know, the people that make Kensington Market what it is can't afford to live there anymore. The artists, the activists, the people that just make it so gosh darn interesting and amazing are getting priced out. So this is how we can keep them in Kensington Market and keep it affordable. Again, you know, different series, Series A, 2.5% interest, 3 years, 500 minimum. Series B, 3.5% interest, 5-year term, $5,000 minimum. And the Series C, 4.5% interest, 7-year term, 25K minimum. This is a newer organization than Indwell. Indwell's been around for like 50 years. Like they've been around for a very long time. They have a long list of projects that they've built, right? And that their goal, the project of what they're trying to do in Hamilton, is a lot bigger. Like they're I think it's like 4 different projects that they're building in Hamilton. Kensington Market is a lot more grassroots. So, you know, they don't have as much of a track record. They haven't been around as long. You know, that is the reality of this. That said, it's like me, Kensington Market is so near and dear to my heart. I certainly get a lot of warm fuzzies. when it comes to Kensington Market, and participating in that to me is just a really, really cool thing. The third one that came live is different. So Go Parity. So Go Parity, this is different. This is not a community bond. The first two are community bonds. This one is very, very different. This is what we call private finance. Okay. So this is not backed by an asset. Instead, they have different projects here. The one that they are doing here is called Sober Island Oysters, where they are boosting oyster cultivation in Nova Scotia. This is really cool. Darryl, I know how much you love local sustainable food. How nice would some Nova Scotia oysters be, right? So you can learn about it, that this is like a family business, right? This is a family's commitment to quality, sustainability, and the joy of sharing fresh oysters straight from the sea. Okay, so this is really, again, grassroots local food. We can talk about the impact there, but it is, the viability here, this is a little bit riskier. They're not using it to buy a building or to build a building. There is no asset behind this, meaning that you could lose your money when it comes to this, right? The minimum investment, that said, is only, I think, like $10. So again, you can do this with small dollar amounts, and you might suggest that, I might suggest that, starting very small with this, because this is riskier. They do have this rating system. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I did do a webinar with Go Parity, where we talked about one that was a higher rating, but this is like a C+ rating. This is pretty low. So this is kind of risky if something happens to these oysters, right? Like you might lose your money on this, and that, yeah, but it does pay a higher return at 7.5% per year. So these are the types of investments, if you've got specific questions, right? Rip the Boat, Kensington Market. That was your spot in Kensington Market, right?
I mean, one of them.
That was a great part. I remember having some dance parties at the Boat.
What a weird place.
Julie's following Indwell here in Hamilton. Absolutely. Gwillem, Kensington Market, absolutely hard it. It really, Gail, like to you, it's so hard with these. And this is why I say it might make sense for us to sit down if you really are suffering from analysis paralysis on this, right? Where we might want to sit down and talk about those impact investments, the differences between them. Let's work you through that. Any of them are great. They do have their own unique risks. They do have their own unique sort of warm fuzzies in terms of their impact. Happy to dive deeper. I am, fingers crossed, we'll get the opportunity to do webinars with them. If that's something that you want, like throw it in the chat, let me know. Because I think that's something that I likely can sort of hook up if we want to be able to dive deeper into it. But that really, will do, since previous D can increase their minimum investment. This is a thing that happens. Are these investment minimums, right? That absolutely does happen. So, it's the type of thing where, let's chat about them. There are some really cool options. I do have this list. I'll throw this list in the chat, and I will make sure I put it in the YouTube comment section, just so that people can access this amazing free resource that I built, that I just kind of like keep track of these impact investments. And whenever there's a new one, I sort of throw them up on the list, and then I do my best to see if it makes sense. If there's enough interest, then we'll do a webinar, and I'll get to interrogate them, and we can dive deeper together into that impact investment.
I think we should just pencil it in right now. Like we're at April 9th, May 9th, impact investing. I think it would have to honestly be 3 different ones, because there is such an incredible spectrum, and each one is so unique.
I know.
There are so many credible opportunities out there, but you really do have to kind of dig into them. It's not like stock and stock and stock and bonds and ETF and ETF and ETF. There's a lot of similarities with many of these opportunities, which both Tim and I love. Like, our excitement level is going to go through the roof, and we could definitely talk to like midnight about them. But let's pencil it in. Honestly,
okay,
probably like a 2 or 3 part series of webinars on impact investing, because I think one of the points, the information out there is tricky to come by, and it is very particular to each one. Not to say that they are riskier or any sort of worse off, but there's particularities to each of them.
Absolutely. We'll see. I've done a showcase in the past where I've like gotten a few of them together, and we kind of do 1, 2, 3. But I hear you. I do think there's enough sort of, interest and things to dig into, both on the financial side, but then also on the warm fuzzy side. Like, these are some really, really cool impact investments. So again, this is, part of the portfolio. Really the goal for tonight was to really focus on this idea of shifting, the bulk of your investments, really what we would talk about, sort of the market securities. Of course, with Darryl and I, we're both so passionate about impact investments that's always something that we're sort of, happy to chat about. In my case, it makes it a little bit easier for me to talk about these things. I don't have to follow all the rules that Darryl does. But this is a part of the sustainable economy that I just get so excited about. So Gail, let's get you through that analysis paralysis. We'll get you making a decision, and we'll get it all sorted out. All right, how are we doing here? Anything else in the chat? It looks like we're good. We went over. Oh my goodness, thank you for people who stuck around an hour and 40 minutes. I can't tell you, those who watched the whole YouTube video just feel so honored that you spent this time with us. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. Super, super grateful. Darryl, any final words?
No, just plenty of gratitude for spending the time with us, and also just sharing and the excitement about this perspective of investing, debunking the myths that you have to give up some type of financial return in order to do good. That is not true. You can have your cake and eat it too. It is intimidating. It's loaded with lots of fear. Hopefully we've done an all right job of sort of leveling out, sort of what the things to watch out for. But please do reach out to either of us if you're really serious about making that move. We'll go over all of this information, plot it out, make sure you're feeling comfortable, and then we're just going to do it. Because we know how to, and it's time. Just get over the fears and make the move.
Yes, and be smart about it and be thoughtful about it. And we're here. We've done this, dozens of times, hundreds of times. So, we're here to make sure that it goes smoothly. But thank you so much, Darryl. That was so well said. Thank you for joining us tonight. Everyone who joined us live, thank you so much. It means the world that you spent your Tuesday evening. Those watching on YouTube, oh my goodness, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Can't wait for the impact investment series. All right, looks like I've got my next webinar schedule figured out. Let's I'll get a date in the book for that. But thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Really excited to see you and talk to you in these free consultations, and just know that we're here for you. Have a great night. Bye.